After looking at two of the more recent add-ons from Caledonia Works, namely the LNER F7 and LSWR L11, I thought it was time to shine the spotlight on an older add-on for a change. There was a lot to choose from, especially following the developer's unexpected act of generosity in October 2025, but in the end, I settled on the Great Western Railway 2600 class, also known as the Aberdare. The class was introduced in 1900 with the construction of prototype locomotive number 33, later renumbered as 2600 in 1912. The production locomotives, of which there were 80, were built at Swindon Works between 1901 and 1907. Incidentally, the numerically first 49 Aberdares had the same numbers as New Zealand's DX class diesel locomotives, which were originally numbered in the 2600 series, but renumbered in the late 1970s, and Aberdare's 2601 through 2610, which were actually the last of their class to be built, used numbers that were previously occupied by the unsuccessful Kruger class. The Aberdare nickname came about as a result of these locomotives primarily being employed on coal trains between Aberdare in South Wales and Swindon in the English county of Wiltshire. The 2600s were introduced in an era when outside frames and cranks were still a common sight on the Great Western Railway, but with their outside frames, tall cabs, low running boards, and large Swindon Standard No. 4 boilers, I've never really known what to make of the 2600's appearance. Aberdare's 2621 through 2660, as well as the prototype number 33, were originally built with a Swindon Standard No. 2 parallel boiler, while the rest of the class had the Standard No. 4 tapered boiler. Although the Aberdares were generally good locomotives, their steam reversing gear had a tendency to drift, so drivers had to keep a close eye on it. Starting in 1908, the class was equipped with superheaters, and they started receiving top feeds from 1911 onwards. From 1929, some Aberdares started running with tenders from withdrawn ROD 280 locomotives, which had been acquired by the GWR after World War I and redesignated as the 3000 class. With the advent of the mighty 7200 class 282 tank engines, withdrawal and scrapping of the 2600 class began in 1934. Gradual withdrawals continued until 1939, but 5 Aberdares, numbers 2600, 2648, 2649, 2652 and 2657, were retained as war reserves and returned to service in 1940. Withdrawals recommenced in 1944, and at least 4 members of the class were still in service upon the formation of British Railways in 1948. The last Aberdare to be withdrawn was number 2657, going in October 1949, and sadly, none of these locomotives have survived into preservation. CW released the GWR 2600 class for TS Classic in January 2020. Time really flies, doesn't it? 6 years later, and the 2600 is still available to buy from CW's website for £15, or around $34 in my local currency. In saying that, I didn't pay for my copy of the 2600 class, nor did I pirate it. We don't condone piracy here at DC 4260 Productions. The Aberdare was one of the add-ons kindly gifted to me by Chris Wilson himself in October 2025. Although some Aberdares passed into British Railways ownership, with the last one being withdrawn in 1949, there are no BR liveries included in the pack. As for the liveries that were included, there are 6 of them, and the selection is as follows. GWR Indian Red, 1900 to 1905, GWR Churchwood livery, 1905 to 1922, GWR Unlined Green, 1923 to 1934, with Great Western lettering, GWR Unlined Green, 1934 to 1942, with the shirt button logo, GWR Unlined Green, 1942 to 1949, with GWR lettering, and GWR Wartime Black, 1942 to 1945. Your mileage may vary, but my personal favourite livery in the Aberdare pack is the 1905 to 1922 lined green, because I am of the opinion that Great Western engines generally look better with black and orange lining and black frames. The Aberdare pack only includes one type of tender, namely the Churchwood 3500 gallon type, but if you've got CW's Great Western Railway 8K pack, which also includes the ROD 280s, then you can run an Aberdare with the ROD tender, although there is a noticeable difference in textures between the 2600 and the ROD tender. It's worth noting that, unfortunately, the prototype Aberdare number 33 is not included in the add-on, and the only boiler type modelled is the aforementioned Swindon Standard number 4. Despite the model's age, I am of the opinion that it still holds up well in 2026. In other words, Chris did well to capture the look of these, in my opinion, oddly proportioned locomotives. As for the textures, he has made a noticeable improvement in this department in the years since 2020, although that's not to say that the Aberdare's textures are poor, not in my opinion anyway. For one thing, I like the presence of subtle weathering on the buffer beams, frames, and other places that would be difficult to clean. Incidentally, I also noticed tiny droplets of oil in what I'm pretty sure is the lubricator. As for features and scripting, the 2600 class uses Simnation's Locomotion 1.3. I was about to say 2.0 since I'm so used to reviewing newer CW add-ons, but I quickly corrected myself. Anyway, the Aberdare doesn't have the newer / more advanced features that you'll find on post-2023 CW releases, but what she does have includes, but is not limited to, a 3D number plate with dynamic numbers for all members of the class, numerous cab camera views, a customizable headlamp arrangement on both the locomotive and tender, with period-accurate GWR lamps, a fully detailed cab, 3D firebox, animated valve gear inside the frames, cab lighting effects, a working water scoop, which is lowered with T and raised with Shift T, a boiler water level that fluctuates depending on the route gradient, and fire intensity synchronized with the exhaust beat. For the longest time, I thought the fire intensity feature was something that had been introduced more recently than it actually was. As for any routes that feature working water troughs, 2 come to mind, namely Dovetail's Riviera line in the 50s and Steam Sound Supreme's Stainmore, Shap and Eden Valley, both of which have already appeared in dedicated reviews on this channel. As for the Aberdare's audio, it was supplied by SSS, and I remember it being a mostly new sound set, as opposed to the same sounds that had been used numerous times on previous Great Western locomotive packs from other developers. Upon revisiting the Aberdare, I noticed that she doesn't have the control plus spacebar short whistles, and the B whistle is the only part of the sound set I recognise from pre-2020 GWR packs. I was curious to see how an Aberdare would perform with a freight train on a route that has steep gradients, so I conducted a test run from Truro to Falmouth on the ancient Falmouth branch route of December 2010. Before I forget, it's worth noting that the ideal fire mass for the Aberdare is between 455 and 475 pounds on the F5 heads-up display, or between 39 and 42% on the F4 HUD. CW locomotives are generally easy to drive once you get the hang of it, as the keybinds for their controls are pretty much the standard keybinds for Steam Locomotive controls in this game. Generally speaking, the CW engines fully support driving via the F4 heads-up display as well. It's also worth noting that the 2600 class doesn't have a functioning reverser lock, and in all honesty, I can't remember when that feature was first introduced on CW products. As for how locomotive number 2632 performed on this run to Falmouth, she was up to 20 miles per hour just before the first tunnel out of Truro, and was doing 29 by the time she hit the first significant incline after Penwithers Junction, where we met Large Prairie number 6106, the one I saw at Didcot. The next challenge was to find a reverser setting at which the engine didn't lose too much speed, as I couldn't get it to accelerate on the incline. She only lost about 5 miles per hour upon reaching the top of the 1 in 66 incline and entering Sparnock Tunnel, after which I let her coast down the other side of the hill before running past Perrinwell and climbing the next hill after that station. Throughout the run, I did my best to maintain fuel at the ideal levels, and found that coasting downhill is a good time to inject water into the boiler. Thinking back to the Aberdare's reverser, between 30 and 40% cutoff seems to do the trick once you've got her up to speed. All things considered, I reckon the Aberdare did a decent job at hauling the heavy freight train to Falmouth. She didn't lose as much speed on the inclines as I thought she would, and the boiler pressure never dropped below 175 psi. Before I forget, I should mention that this consist I was using is one of the Aberdare's standard quick-drive consists. The only requirement for said consists is GWR Wagon Pack 1, which you can buy from CW's website for £13. I'm always curious to see just how fast a given locomotive can go, so I ran a speed test with an Aberdare. This was a run from Stranraer Town to Glenluce, on the old Western Lines of Scotland route, with locomotive number 2613 hauling a trio of Mark I coaches, specifically the Armstrong Powerhouse Mark Is. During this run to Glenluce, the locomotive made it up to at least 46.1 miles per hour on level track. I initially got her up to around 35 on the climb out of Stranraer, but ended up getting the fire mass well above the ideal level quoted in the manual, because I thought that the locomotive wasn't maintaining or building up boiler pressure all that well. In hindsight, I realised that I ended up unintentionally smothering the fire. I also noticed that the Aberdare is pretty thirsty when she's working hard, and this experience made me realise that she's better suited to cruising along at around 39 miles per hour, as opposed to being thrashed like a big Pacific hauling an express train. All things considered, I'm of the opinion that CW's rendition of the Great Western Railway 2600 class is still decent for an add-on released as far back as early 2020, although I wouldn't consider the 2600 to be my favourite GWR locomotive. In all honesty, I haven't really got a favourite Western engine, even after seeing some of them in real life. Even so, I can still recommend picking up the Aberdare if you're interested in the Great Western, be that as a casual fan, a flat-out GWR veg, or somewhere in the middle, and like a nice change of pace from the faster express trains hauled by the big 460s. It would be nice to get a new version of the 2600 someday, complete with Locomotion 2.0 and all the new features, but I realise that Chris has got other work to do, so it won't bother me if we don't get a new Aberdare anytime soon. As for where I'd rate the 2600 class in her current state, I honestly don't know. I'm thinking somewhere between 6 and 7.5, but I can't really make a solid decision. In any case, if you've stuck around to the end of the video, you win lunch from a cafe near a famous sea wall in Devon. The food is delicious,